Hey guys, I'm Heidi Priebe, and on this channel we talk about Myers-Briggs personality types, attachment styles, and every other type of theory that helps you understand yourself and other people better, as well as how to bridge those gaps. So, as many of you already know, I am an ENFP myself. I wrote the ENFP Survival Guide, and I also run a 6-week ENFP Soul Bootcamp course for those of you who are looking to learn to play to your natural strengths more effectively as an ENFP. And what I wanted to talk about today is what emotional maturity looks like for an ENFP, because it has been a topic that has been on my mind for a while. A few weeks back, I made a video called Unhealthy versus Healthy ENFP, and I want to differentiate between the concept of health and the concept of maturity. So healthy versus unhealthy in terms of our overall holistic health as ENFPs. I see more as something that will fluctuate on and off over the entirety of our lives. So you can be a 10-year-old ENFP or a 95-year-old ENFP, and you can be at various levels of health depending on what's going on in your life. But when I think of maturity, I'm thinking specifically of how well a given ENFP has integrated or failed to integrate the lessons that they've learned in their lives. So for most of us, maturity comes with age, and we continue to mature throughout the entirety of our lives. For other people, certain life experiences can shape certain parts of us earlier than others, so that we can develop a sense of maturity in some areas that others might have to wait more time to arrive at, and some of us may struggle with maturity the whole way through. I think that it is an ongoing process, but what I wanted to talk about is what emotional and kind of holistic maturity looks like for an ENFP relative to another type. I think that growing up, a lot of ENFPs kind of have this idea of what a mature person looks like, and they think that it means getting rid of who they are at their core and learning to operate in the world in a way that is kind of almost the opposite of who they are. For an ENFP, emotional maturity is going to look much different than it is for an ISFJ or an ISTP or another type who does not share our cognitive processes. So this is not about shaming any of us for not being in any of these places yet. It is more about just providing ourselves with guideposts of what might start to happen as we move through life that are a measure of us moving into the next stage of who we're going to be. So without getting us further into the weeds, sign number one of emotional maturity in an ENFP is that they have stopped pretending to be who they are not, and they have stopped feeling chronic shame over the way that they operate. Now, this is not necessarily something that all ENFPs start out with, right? If you were raised in an environment where perceiving and being an intuitive were more accepted and nurtured in you, you may have come out of the gate thinking of the way that you operate as a strength, and you may have always felt comfortable showing up in the world exactly as you are, and that is a wonderful thing. However, many ENFPs, because we live in a society that was kind of built for SJs for the most part, really think that emotional maturity for them is going to mean learning to live as though they are an ESTJ or an ISTJ. Means that they are going to have to finally settle down and stop having all of these different ideas and thoughts and things that they want to work on. It means they're going to suddenly no longer have wanderlust, no longer have a million different plans for the future. And this is either good or bad news for some of you. But from my experience, knowing ENFPs later on in life, I can guarantee you that those things do not go away. They just become steadily more refined with age, and also we stop expecting them to go away. So when I talk to ENFPs who are in their 60s or 70s or anywhere past kind of midlife, what I do not see is people who have turned into SI DOMs. What I do see is people who understand that having a million different ideas and loving to try out new things and kind of looking at life as this all-you-can-eat buffet is not something that has to hold you back. It is an inherent part of who they are. It's what keeps them identifying as a lifelong learner, and most of them feel very comfortable with that aspect of themselves in a way that a lot of younger ENFPs might struggle to accept. As you grow and gain perspective as any type, you start to learn what opportunities lie within your struggles. And what I've really noticed with a lot of older ENFPs is that the commitments that they made that when they were younger, they were so afraid was going to bog them down and keep them from pursuing other things in life, ended up being the building blocks for so many other possibilities, for so many other doors that they opened in their lives. So for example, they may have feared early on that getting married and starting a family was going to kind of tie them down and keep them away from the life they wanted to live. And then later on in life, they realized, no, that was me expanding my life. Starting a family just meant bringing more people I love into my world and getting to watch them take on new opportunities and getting to help them source new adventures. Taking that job that I was afraid was going to bog me down ended up opening all of these doors to other things that I wanted to learn and experience and grow through. Buying that property ended up grounding me in a community of people who ended up bringing immense value into my life. So one of the most beautiful things that I often see with ENFPs who've had a little bit more life experience is that ability to see things that they once thought would drag them down as opening more doors, and they don't ever expect themselves to stop opening doors. I know one ENTP in particular in his 70s who just recently went back to get his bachelor's degree in computer science because he decided that he wanted to start his career over as a developer. This past year, I met someone who is either an ENFP or an ESFP, but definitely had that kind of joie de vivre that you find with EXFP types, hiking, who does a solo hike every single year, and I met him on his 80th birthday when he was exploring a new trail on his own. And I think that all of these examples end up serving the point that as we age, we end up opening more doors for ourselves and growing calmer and calmer in the understanding that there's no one particular route that is going to give us everything we want in life, but there are opportunities and possibilities down every road. So the process of integrating those past experiences as an ENFP allows us to grow calmer and calmer in the knowledge that we're not supposed to give up or stop being who we are as we grow up. If anything, it just gets easier for us to show up more as ourselves in the world because we have more past experience to draw on, and we now know how to manage our energy in a more holistic way. I guess that's a fancy way of saying that we kind of find our place in the world a little bit as our lives go on. And in a lot of cases, probably also get a lot more comfortable with the understanding that we will carve our place out wherever we can't find it. Sign number 2 of an emotionally mature ENFP is that they use their introverted feeling for self-awareness rather than using it to react to every feeling that comes their way. So, young ENFPs tend to take their introverted feeling and the data that they're getting in their introverted feeling as fact and think that they have to act on every emotion that comes through their mind. Now, of course, our feelings matter, and of course, we need to act in accordance with the way that we feel so that we're not fighting against ourselves our entire lives. But I think that the more ENFPs grow and develop, the more they learn that FI is actually this unique process for us, in that having it as our auxiliary function means we're a little bit more detached from it than the average person. So we have this ability to both feel strong emotions, but also very keenly observe them from the vantage point of our extroverted intuition, understand and unpack them. And I find that as ENFPs age, if they become intentional about honing that mindfulness skill, they can become some of the absolute most self-aware people out there, and they can also be very adept at communicating that self-awareness to other people. And if you are a young ENFP, this is also probably a huge relief, because when you're young, as an FI auxiliary type, your emotions can feel very overwhelming. Your experience of life can feel very overwhelming, and it can really feel like you have to react to everything that comes your way. As you grow, you will learn emotions are information. And if we can take that information and learn to evaluate it in the right way and figure out which pieces of information are really good pieces that I really should be acting on and augmenting and trying to find more of in my life, versus which pieces of information are either faulty, inaccurate, or not serving me. And how do I manipulate that data to make sure that I'm getting more of what I want, more of what helps me move towards the life that I'm interested in having, and less of what's keeping me stuck. And I think that as ENFPs grow up, they really do learn to have more of a friendship with their introverted feeling, for kind of lack of a better term. When you're young, it can feel more like you are at the mercy of your emotional life. And as you age, you can learn to grow into that part of yourself, develop more of an inner adult that manages your inner emotional world. And you have the capacity to develop an incredible amount of self-awareness, which I really think ends up driving you deeper into the human experience, right? Because the more we're able to observe, witness, sit with, and integrate our emotions, the more authentically we end up experiencing them. When our emotions are really intense and hitting us from every angle, we're not really savoring them, right? But mature introverted feeling can do that. It can really pick out what matters and focus deeply on it. And that is another sign of a really mature ENFP. Sign number 3 of emotional maturity in the ENFP is that their habits support their spontaneity rather than impeding upon it. So this is the difference between someone who feels like they are constantly at war with their inferior function, so that their introverted sensing is always trying to take them away from their extroverted intuition, versus the person who has learned to get their introverted sensing to serve their extroverted intuition. And we've talked a little bit about how this works from kind of the ground up in the videos that I've put out about ENFP productivity and motivation. But the end result of this is that you end up building a life full of habits, full of routines, full of rituals that really serve you becoming more and more yourself. So once you get that introverted sensing stuff to kind of run on autopilot, once you're no longer spending so much of your energy figuring out how to feed and clothe and put a roof over your own head, or trying to eternally unpack the next career move, you have more time to focus on what you love, which is the exploration of new ideas and new experiences. And you may have figured out that the healthier I am, the more I keep myself in a routine that allows me to maintain what feels good for me on a physical level, the more I'm able to engage with the parts of life that I really enjoy. You might find out that the more I make a practice out of retaining new pieces of information or engaging with new friends or whatever it is that really lights you up, the better I'm able to navigate the challenges and hardships that life throws my way. So the routines and rituals that you have built your life around no longer feel like they're taking away from what you want out of life. It feels like you are augmenting your ability to live a deep, rich, fulfilling, and meaningful life. And I think there's also something to be said about the fact that the longer you go on in life, the more you learn who I am is not going away. So how do I show up as an adult in a way that really supports my inner child? There will always be that part of you that is so excited, so joyful, so curious, right? And if you can design your life as an adult would design the life for a curious child, where you have your physical needs met, you don't have to worry and stress out about safety and survival, and now you can just let the child within you play within this beautiful life you've created for yourself, that is such a strong sign of emotional maturity in the ENFP. It's almost like the more your childlike self is coming out in your day-to-day life, and the more you've created an environment where it's safe for you to do that, the more that shows your maturity. What's that quote? Like, it takes a very long time to become young? Something like that definitely applies here. Sign number 4 of the mature ENFP is that they know what they don't know, and they're able to check their blind spots. So when we are young, there's another quote here. I'm bad at sourcing my quotes today. But someone once said, when you only have a hammer, every problem looks like a nail. And I think that that is so crucial for everyone of any personality type. An ISTP will always look at the problems in their lives as, how can I TI my way through this? Or how can I SE my way through that? Particularly when they're young. And an ENFP will always look at problems and go, how can I NEFI my way through this? As you grow up, face more challenges, you are inevitably going to come up against problems that you cannot NEFI, TE, or SI your way through. You're going to learn there is a time and a place where I really need to use extroverted feeling, extroverted sensing, introverted thinking, and introverted intuition. And you do have enough of a grasp on those functions that you can learn to kind of hone them to serve the strengths of your more dominant functions. This is something, again, we talk about in the ENFP Soul Bootcamp course. So we go over each of your shadow functions and talk about how to gain just enough awareness of them to help you serve the interests of your dominant functions. But there will also be cases where you just need to outsource certain things, where you just need to go ask for help, borrow someone else's tools for a little while, or figure out how to set up a system in your life in such a way that you don't have to FE or NI that hard that often. But you're also not mucking up the process by trying to FI your way through something that requires FE or whatever it is, right? So you're aware of where your blind spots are as you grow up and go through new experiences as an ENFP, and you are comfortable knowing what you don't know, admitting what you don't know, and kind of setting up some safeguards around that so that you're not necessarily working at a disadvantage when you're encountering something that your dominant 4 functions do not really serve you in tackling. So there's a sense of humility that develops. Just like we know more and more who we are as we grow up, we also know more and more who we are not, and who it's okay that we're not, and what battles we can just kind of lay down and go, this is not mine to fight, and find some things we're more aligned with. Sign number 5 of the emotionally mature ENFP is that they can balance their decision-making process between TE and FI. So when we are young as ENFPs, what we often do is one of 2 things. We will try to either over-rely on introverted feeling and do only the things that we want to do, follow our hearts kind of to our own detriment in many cases. And that's totally fine. It's A, part of the learning process, and B, a lot of fun sometimes. But then there will also be this kind of kickback effect a lot of the time, where once we have followed our hearts for long enough, we're like, okay, now it's time to get serious, time to cut all of the fun out of my life, be this kind of very straight and narrow person. And it takes us a long time to learn how to do a little bit of both of those things at the same time. So finding the career that both really lights you up inside, but also pays your bills. Honing a romantic relationship to the place where the spark is kept alive, but your world is not burning down. Being spontaneous enough that things stay interesting, but not to the point of self-destruction, right? And the good news about this is that the more you grow as an ENFP, the more it's going to feel good to find that balance center. It is really fun when you're young to live in extremes, right? And I don't think that any of us should stop trying to do that if we're not seeing real consequences of it and we enjoy living that way, right? Get away with that for as long as you can, but you will probably find as you grow up and as you integrate a little bit more of that SI and find yourself wanting a little bit more stability, that you're going to start seeking out kind of natural middle points between those two decision-making functions where you're able to understand how you can use your emotions to guide your decision-making process and then use your thinking functions to get you the thing that you want. So FI decides what you want, TE sources it for you, and you have a kind of constant feedback loop between those two things. That might start out as like 75% FI dictating, 25% TE delivering, and then slowly shift over the years until it's more of a 50-50 split. And in that case, you might find that a lot of the time you are getting happy by making the decision that makes sense, which you may never have thought would be the case. But I've heard distant rumors that it is sometimes. Sign number 6 of the emotionally mature ENFP. They have learned to show up as their authentic selves without being off-putting. So this is something that I hear and see ENFPs struggling with quite a bit. They feel like they either have to hide who they are and completely blend in with other people by pretending that they're someone that they're not, or they have to be their authentic selves in a way that other people find very overwhelming and intense and off-putting. And I think that the longer we go through life as ENFPs, the more we find a way to kind of put that panic down and learn to show up as who we are without that social mask, without making other people uncomfortable, because we start getting a little bit more in touch with extroverted feeling. So whenever I hear someone saying to me, like, I don't know how to be authentic without freaking people out, whenever I show up as who I am, it's too much, I'm too loud, I'm too emotional, I'm too full of ideas and I exhaust other people, I think that part of what that is that we're not tuned into extroverted feeling. So we're not always noticing what specifically it is that's actually making other people uncomfortable. And that's a really big thing. Like maybe what you think is happening is that they don't like you talking about all your ideas, but actually what's happening is that they're just feeling a little bit self-conscious because you haven't asked them that many questions about themselves. And maybe they're feeling like you're actually not that interested in them. Or maybe, and I am going to make a video that more specifically addresses this, if you feel like you are too emotional for other people, it's possible that there are some emotional self-regulation skills that you didn't learn early on in life, and that it would actually help you to start working through. And these are all tools that we pick up on along the way that allow us to have more authentic interactions without kind of putting people off. But it's also possible that you err a little bit in the other direction, in that you have shame around who you are as an ENFP, so you tend to blend in really hard and have trouble bringing your true self and your true ideas and thoughts into conversation. And this is another thing where I've noticed that many ENFPs, as they grow up, end up kind of finding the communities, the group, the work environments where their true self shines in, right? And the more that you can seek out those places for yourself and form relationships where you truly are seen and appreciated for who you are and the way that you show up and process the world, the less painful it feels to tamper yourself down and blend in a little bit more in the few situations where that still feels like what you have to do. As long as you feel known, seen, accepted, and celebrated for the person you actually are in at least some environments, it doesn't necessarily feel as important to be able to do that all of the time. Right? So this is less about learning to temper yourself and more about finding the places where you are accepted, nurtured, and celebrated, and leaning into that as much as you possibly can. Last sign, number 7 of the emotionally mature ENFP, is that they are picky about the experiences that they invest in. So again, this is something that can only come from a lifetime of having indiscriminately explored, experimented, gone down every alleyway or pathway that we found remotely interesting. You start to develop a palette for which types of experiences and which aspects of being alive you really like and want to repeat. So I have an interview in the ENFP Soul Bootcamp with Dario Nardi, and he talks about how as ENFPs grow up, they actually develop a little bit of taste, which I thought was very funny because I've been joking my entire life about having no taste. But what I mean by that is that I have so much curiosity and I'm so open to so many different avenues of experience that I don't have a lot of things I really hold myself back from. But as you grow up, you do start to learn more through trial and error, and that trial and error absolutely has to happen first, which things are more consistently a hit for you and which things are more consistently a miss. And you can use that information to start building meaningful rituals into your life that allow you to really flourish as the person that you are. And this brings us all the way back to the first point, right? I think that with ENFPs, it's kind of this process of like emerging into the world fully as yourself, figuring out where that does and doesn't work, hiding yourself for a little while. And I don't think this should be the case, right? If this was not your experience, that's a great thing. But I think that many ENFPs go through this experience of feeling like they have to kind of temper parts of themselves, tone themselves down to try to fit into society. But as you grow up, I think that there can be this re-emergence of the self as you go through life and start to realize there are certain places where I can show up as myself. How do I put myself in more of those rooms? How do I learn to use my other functions in order to design a life for myself where the parts of me that naturally energize me are able to come out more and more and more often? And so instead of fighting myself, I am more and more learning to wake up to myself and to design my life around the person who I authentically am. So I think that the older an ENFP gets, in the best case scenario, the more ENFP they get. Does that make sense? We learn how to use our skills in such a way that we can find a way to structure the rest of our lives around those things that we truly enjoy and that light us up and that make us feel completely and totally present, which is something that early on in life we can struggle to be. It's almost like the older we get, the better we become at being the parents for our inner children that we needed when we were actually children and when we were actually learning to navigate a world that wasn't necessarily built for us. All right, that is all I have to say for today. If you have any thoughts or any signs of emotional maturity in the ENFP that I did not mention, and I'm sure you do because this list was so far from exhaustive, please leave them in the comments. I always love hearing from you guys. I love you. I hope you're taking care of yourselves, and I will see you back here again really soon.